Hi Finch Hampstead, it is so good to be a part of your service today. My name's Leon, I'm lead pastor at Life Central Church in Halesoe, and we are part of the Further Faster Network along with you guys. And it's just such a privilege to be here with you and to share with you in this service. And you know, I want to talk about something that we don't talk about, but I want to talk about this: road rage. Anyone suffer from road rage? Anyone been a victim of road rage? The dictionary defines it as this: aggressive or angry behavior exhibited by a driver. Behaviors include rude and offensive gestures, verbal insults, physical threats or dangerous driving methods targeted toward another driver or pedestrian in an effort to intimidate or release frustration. One study says that people who customize their cars with car stickers are more likely to be road rage guilty. Okay, I know we don't really do that these days. But you know, there's this kind of rage inside of us, but we wouldn't use that as a word. We would use this word: frustration. I'm not angry, I'm just frustrated. Anyone ever said that? You know, I'm not angry with that person, I'm just frustrated. But you know, when you come back to road rage, there's other kinds of rage as well. There's rap rage, which is not like the rap music, but rapping, you know, that inability to wrap the package up for Christmas or for the birthday. There's also trolley rage. You see that in supermarkets. There's also computer rage. In fact, while I was preparing this talk, you know, my iPad stopped working and I'm banging away on it and it's computer. I'm not angry, I'm just frustrated. And that's what we say. But here's the reality. Our line that we're using for this series is this: how do we say no to the emotions that compete for control? Because that rage, that anger, we call it frustration because it sounds a little bit better, but actually that anger and that rage becomes an emotion that threatens to take control. It becomes the boss of us, doesn't it? And you see, what we do is we monitor our behavior, but we struggle to monitor our heart. And here's the big idea for today: when emotions take control, things get out of control. When emotions take control, things get out of control. And this week we're looking at the emotion of anger, and we're going to call it what it is. Nobody wants anger to be the boss of them. It's anger that destroys marriages. It's anger that destroys families and churches and communities and nations. It's that emotion that becomes the boss of us. And literally it's defined, anger, as this: an emotion related to an interpretation having been offended, wronged, hurt, or denied. So anger is that emotion when we interpret something and we think, you know what? I've been hurt here. I've been offended. I've been denied. It's a universal emotion. We can't not have anger any more than we can not have hunger, libido, or pain. It's a universal deal. Some research on anger: the average man loses his temper 6 times a week compared to a woman 3 times. Women get more angry at people, whereas men get more angry at things. Men are often more physical with their anger than women. And there are different kinds of anger as well. There's extroverted anger and there's introverted anger. And I want to, do you remember Angry Birds? Anyone seen the movie or you've played the game? And I think there are some Angry Birds out there as well. And one of them is the short fuse kind of anger. You know, if you as old as me, you'll remember Basil Fawlty, okay, in Fawlty Towers. You know, he had that kind of short fuse anger. In fact, I remember when me and Alison, my wife, we were not long been married, and we went on holiday to Tenerife, and we flew back into Birmingham, and it was late at night and we were tired, and we went out to the car, and it was tipping it down a rain, and we turned the ignition on the car and my car died. And I was so tired, my anger, my rage, my frustration, short fused, and in the words of Basil Fawlty, I gave the car a damn good thrashing. Okay, and that's what happened, and that's the kind of anger that I used to have when I was younger. But then there's the slow burner, where eventually he or she blows, the slow burner. Then there's passive aggressive. And I love this story of Winston Churchill and the author George Bernard Shaw. And Bernard Shaw wrote a message to Churchill, and it said this: I want to invite you, dear Winston, I want to invite you to the opening night of my play. Here are 2 tickets for you and a friend, if you can find one. Churchill replied, Dear George, unfortunately I'm busy on the opening night. Please send me 2 tickets for your show on the second night, if there is one. That's called passive aggressive. And then there's the permanently simmering, where the anger is underneath and the anger spikes from time to time. But there's also a good anger. The Bible calls it kind of righteous anger. It's the anger that Jesus had when he was in the temple and he drove out everyone because they were exploiting people for their own ends. And it's like when Jesus sees injustice and he sees things wrong, there's like a righteous anger, almost like a righteous rage that rises up, and he wants to do something about it. Me and my wife, we have 2 sons, Josh and Simeon the youngest lad has got complex special needs and learning disability. He's in residential care right now. We love him to bits, but he's one of the most complex young men in our whole area. And when he was young, he was at a special school. And we went through a whole season where our local council were trying to close the special schools. And me and my wife felt that this was wrong. And there was like a sense of righteous anger. And we wanted to do something about it. And so we set up a protection league and we lobbied the local council and MPs. And it was that anger inside that said, this is not right for other people. See, the difference between righteous anger and our anger is this. Righteous anger is when we feel something for other people that they deserve. They're not getting it and they deserve it. But often our anger is when we don't think we're getting what we deserve. That's often the difference between righteous anger. But this is the anger that we want to look at today. Not the righteous anger, but we want to look at that kind of anger when we feel that we've been hurt or offended or we're not getting what we deserve. Because when emotions take control, things get out of control. And we're going to look at a Bible story. Actually, it's a book, it's a letter, and it's called the letter of James. And it was written by James, funnily enough, and James was the brother of Jesus. You ever been intimidated by one of your siblings? Have you ever thought that? Could you think about this? James's brother was Jesus. I mean, James started off skeptical about Jesus, okay? It's his brother. And then he becomes a follower of Jesus, and eventually he loses his life for his faith in Jesus, who was his brother. I mean, what would your brother have to do to convince you that he was the Messiah, the Son of God? It's one of the reasons I believe in Jesus, because when I read the book of James, I think, here's this guy, his brother was Jesus, and he believes that Jesus is the Son of God. Anyway, he writes in James 3, verse 13, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom." James says here, a wise person has insight. A wise person joins up the dots. A wise person is a humble person. Foolish people are arrogant people. Arrogant people don't realize that the rules apply to them as well. They don't realize that they have so little control over things around them. And if there's one thing that I think has impacted all of us during this pandemic that we're all still in, is the lack of control that we have. And almost like we have an illusion that we're in control, when actually we weren't really in control anyway. Just now we know it. We know it for sure. Arrogant people are louder than other people. But the wiser you are, the more humble you are. James goes on to say, but if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. This is really important. This word harbor is really important. It's like James is saying, if you let emotions dock in your heart, okay, they will control your life. They will become the boss of you. And anger is one of those emotions that says, you owe me. You owe me. And if we let it dock in our heart, it becomes a controller of our heart. And then if it's in you, it will come out of you. James goes on to say in verse 13, for where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. James lays out a case here. He says, if you allow this emotion of anger or any other emotions to control you, to dock in your heart, it'll be no wonder that you find chaos on the outside and often in your relationships. And this is all backdrop to the question that James asks in James 4 verse 1 when he says this, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire but do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. What causes fights between me and my wife? I'll tell you the answer to that. My wife. It's always her fault. No, I'm joking. What causes fights between me and my family? It's my family. It's always them. What causes fights between me and my work colleagues? Yep, It's the work colleagues. That's what we do. Whenever we see quarrels, we always project it out. But James says, no, it comes from within you. And here's the key line. You desire, but you do not have. You're not getting what you want. When anger docks in our heart and becomes an emotion that takes control, it's because we're not getting what we want. Show me an angry person and I'll show you a hurt person. Someone that says, you owe me. You took something from me. You took my reputation. You took my family. You took the best years of my life. You took the credit at work that was meant to be me. You owe me. And we let that anger, we let that emotion dock and take control. And that's what causes quarrels and fights. It's not out there, it's in here. It's what's in our heart that causes that kind of stuff. The root of anger is the belief that something has been taken, therefore something is now owed. And you know, people spend their whole lives angry, waiting for that apology or waiting for what's owed them, and maybe it never comes, and so they stay angry for the whole of their life. And you know, part of the problem, I think, is that we just need to say this out loud. I'm not getting what I want. In fact, I want to encourage you right now, when you're watching this, whether it's live or whether it's on demand, why don't you practice saying it right now? I'm not getting what I want. And that's going to be really freaky for some of you. But as you articulate that, I think something inside of you will resonate and say, do you know what? That's what I really think. I'm not getting what I want. So what is your relationship with anger? Do you let it boss you around? Does it control your mood or your mouth? Do you let that anger dock and drive you? You know, are you one of those people that says, you owe me, and you project out all the time? Part of the problem is you're not getting what you want. Today, are you ready to say, anger, you're not the boss of me? So, how do we begin to take control of the anger that competes for control? Let me just give you 3 ideas, 3 take-homes today. Number 1, acknowledge it. You know, you've got to face it. You know, often when I talk to people, especially if they're Christians as well, and if those of you out there and you're not yet a Jesus follower, then just tune out for a minute. But if you are a follower of Jesus, why is it, Christians, that we are really happy to say, I'm hurting, I'm in pain, I'm sad, but we're not happy or comfortable to own the emotion of anger? If you're angry, acknowledge it. You know, face it, name it. He made me angry, surface it. And that's the second thing. We've got to surface it. Having acknowledged it, we need to surface it. You see, the power of anger is in the secrecy. It's painful to expose it, but you may be one story away from a healthy heart. You won't address what you don't confess. And if there is anger in your heart, and especially if it's with another person in your world right now, acknowledge it. Number 2, surface it. And then number 3, deal with it. Deal with it. You ever walked through a spider's web? Ever done that? Like you've walked into a room or something and the spider's web's just got in your hair. How many of you say, oh, I have a spider's web in my hair. Let me just leave it there for a little bit longer. No, you don't do that. Immediately you get rid of it. Immediately, no matter what is happening, you just go, ooh, and you get rid of it. That's the language that the Bible uses. When you've got anger, don't tolerate it. Don't embrace it. Get rid of it. Deal with it. And here's a great verse in Ephesians 4, verse 31, where Paul says this, get rid, that's that image, of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. The Greek phrase, it's written in Greek originally, for get rid, literally means to remove, to separate yourself from. Don't let it dock. Don't let that spider's web dock, and connect around your head. Don't let that anger dock in your heart. Get rid of it. And Paul is writing this letter to the church at Ephesus from a Roman prison. He's got every right to be angry, even to be angry with God, to be angry with the Romans. But he doesn't. He says, hey, get rid of all that. Some of us are so angry that our anger has begun to define us. Don't let your anger define us. There is a life without your anger, and it's a life of freedom. You see, anger does not belong to you. You belong to your anger. Then Paul nails it. If you're a Jesus follower, this is not optional. Listen up. He says in verse 31, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ, God forgave you. How do we deal with the anger that threatens to take control? Well, we forgive. We release because we've been forgiven. We've been released by God. Forgiveness is about canceling a debt that is owed to us. And if we hold out waiting to be paid back for the wrongs done to us, in fact, they're not the one that misses out. We're the one. You see, your pain isn't a trophy to show. It's not a story to tell. It's poison to your soul. It's okay not to get all you want. It's okay to not get all you deserve. Jesus always nudges us away from self and arrogance to others and humility. And you know, Jesus himself shows us, doesn't it, that he didn't get what he deserved. He didn't get what was owed to him. But on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. He didn't allow anger to dock in his soul, to dock in his heart. He didn't let anger become the boss of him. So, as we finish, are you angry with someone or a group of someones? Acknowledge it, surface it, and then deal with it. Don't let that spider's web get around your head. Don't let that anger dock in your heart. Maybe you're angry with yourself. Maybe you're angry with God. And can I just say, if you're angry with God, it's okay. He knows anyway. And he's big enough. He's big enough that he says, hey, on the cross, I didn't only take your sin. I didn't only take your shame. I didn't only take your fear and your brokenness. I took your hurt and I took your anger. And when we give it to him, and when we hand it to him, and when we acknowledge that we're angry, I believe that God gives us an incredible gift. Not only the gift of forgiveness when we need it, but that gift of understanding, that gift of empathy, that gift of his grace, which is, hey, I know it and I take it. And instead of the anger, I want to give you my peace and my grace. Guys, I'd love to pray for you right now. And I know this may be a little bit weird wherever you are, but I'm just going to say a very short, simple prayer. And maybe wherever you are or whenever you're watching this, maybe you could acknowledge right now that, hey, there is some anger. And I know that during this last 6 months or so, during this pandemic, I know I felt anger that I've never felt before. And I haven't been able to understand it always. You know, but I know that some of it has come out of the fact that I could control less than what I thought I could control. And uncertainty has been a bit of a threat and challenge to me during this. But I know also that as I've acknowledged it, as I've surfaced it, as I've dealt with it and handed it to Jesus, he's replaced that with his peace and his grace. And so I'd love to pray for you right now if that's you. And if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, and maybe you're angry with a God and you don't even know whether God exists, but you're angry. Maybe that anger has begun to define you. Maybe even today you could open up and allow him to replace that anger with his grace and his love. Let me pray for you right now. Jesus, I want to thank you so much for every single person watching this, whenever or wherever they are watching it. And God, may they know that you love them so much. And Lord, I pray that they would not let anger be the boss of them. They would not let that emotion take control. They wouldn't let it dock in the harbor of their heart, but they would surrender it to you and receive your grace and your peace. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you guys. Take care.